we're really pleased to have your expertise working with us on sharing wisdom about workplace well-being, because it's a really important topic, as you know, and many employers struggle with employee well-being at the best of times, let alone what's happening in the world right now. So we're really grateful that you're here to help us share some key points.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So we're going to come back and I'd like to hear a bit more about you in just a moment. But first of all, if I can just explain for anyone that's tuning in what we're doing here and what we're going to be sharing. So our purpose from collaborating with this is to help businesses, leaders and managers to really understand their duty when it comes to employee well-being. And of course, not only their duty, but as we've spoken about, best practice as well. And there is a difference. And actually it's best practice that all employers should be striving for. So we're going to be sharing some wisdom, some explanations in 5 key areas. So firstly, the implications and the considerations linked to COVID. And then we'll look at some of the things that employers should do now in order to prepare for the future, because the landscape is going to look very different. And then, of course, we'll look at the difference between the general duty and the requirements versus the best practice, and actually what the recommendations are for managing mental health and well-being at work. And the links also between personal development and well-being. So together, you and I have both experienced this in the workplace and perhaps come at it from very different angles. So I've facilitated personal development in a number of companies that it's caused quite a transformation to their culture. And I know that you've been fundamental in implementing the right measures and practices and policies and processes for employers to be set up for success. So together we can share our expertise to help people get through this. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yep.
Fabulous. So thank you very much. So for everyone watching, just to say, I think it's about 25 years experience you've got.
It is. It seems a short time, really.
Yeah, it certainly does fly.
Yeah.
So that's
variety of different industries, and people wherever they are. But we all have different challenges in our lives at different stages. But yeah, 25 years it has been indeed.
Wow.
And I work with my own consultancy, and I also work with People Puzzles, who provide HR directors for small to medium-sized enterprises that don't need full-time HRDs, but do need some support, as well as obviously I provide operational support as well.
Fabulous. It's really helpful to have your skills, and there could be a number of leaders watching that actually don't have HR support and really don't know where to start. So it's really great to have your input. Thank you. So let's have a look at the impacts of COVID, if we may.
Yes.
Yeah.
Challenging time for everybody.
Absolutely. And we really empathise and appreciate with those challenges that everyone's facing. And I think in HR, we're really, in many ways, at the heart of a lot of those challenges, facing it, aren't we, and managing that change. So it's quite tough. So can I just ask, in your experience through this time, what do you think employers should be doing in order to look after employee well-being?
One of the big things for me, I think, is communication, because most people are used to being in the office. They're used to the water cooler conversations. They're used to being asked questions. Now, all of a sudden, they're working from home. They might not have got a proper setup to be able to work from home. It happened really quickly. Technology is great, but it's very different to actually being with people. They've got other thoughts, like finances, they're impacted. Some staff have been furloughed. Some people are worried about whether they're going to have a job to come back to. Childcare, schools are shut. Can they work with their children running around? Plus the worry about their children as well. And let's not forget, actually, the virus itself. So everybody is in, I read, we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats, or we could potentially be in different boats. So the best thing for employers to do is make sure they communicate as much as possible, regular check-ins, make sure people are as well as they can be, and help where they can, but they can't do everything. You need to recognise as an employee you can't do everything. It's the communication for me that I think is the big issue, and recognise that we're all facing different
Yeah,
challenges.
absolutely. Okay. So have you seen any examples of employers doing that really well with the communication?
Yes, so there's a mixture, isn't there? There's some companies have got staff on furlough while some are still working, but they're working from home, or there's some that parts of the companies that might still be operational, for example, in manufacturing. So it's getting that right, making sure that their health is looked after at work, and also then the communication. So there's regular, what I've seen is regular company updates, regular one-to-one check-ins with the manager. So just ring in saying, how are you? What can I do to support you? Are you okay with your workload at the moment? How are you doing with your family? Do you need to change your hours of work? There's lots of different things that you can help. And the best thing I've seen is that regular communication, and then quite often a Friday social.
Oh.
Not everybody will join, and nor should they. But a little quiz or just a check-in is fabulous, because people do miss people.
Mm-hmm. That's refreshing that that's still happening. Now,
Yeah.
when I was listening to that, I picked up on when you said about asking about family. And I think some managers who are still finding their feet actually struggle with how personal should they get? How much can they really ask about their family? So is there a line, and how should they approach that?
I think you get led by the individual as to how much they want to give to you. So how are you? How are your family? How are you coping? And if it's an open conversation, you can ask, and you can say, well, or if the child runs in front of the screen, for example, how are they coping with you working from home? Be led by the individual, because you don't want to get too invasive and infect their privacy. But at the same time, it is important to understand that the challenges we're facing.
Absolutely. So what would you say have been the biggest challenges?
Well, there's a lot of anxiety going on. So the biggest challenges is getting that level right. It's making sure that people are still able to do their job, and still got not just the equipment, but the mental space to do their job from home, and that appreciation and understanding that it is a difficult time, and we can support. I think there's also basics like saying, make sure you take a break. People are working from home, laptops are at home, they can work all the time. No, don't. Make sure you take your break. It's too easy to slip into that. Just little things, but it's important.
Yeah, I'm really pleased you said that, because I have also heard people who are slipping into the habit of overworking because it's there, because the laptop is there, and suddenly work merges with home and there's no divide. So how would you suggest that employers set boundaries and manage that?
I think it's all about setting the workload and the parameters and delivery dates, and not having the expectation. Make it very clear. If an owner wants to work at midnight, that's fine, but make it absolutely clear they don't expect a response on Saturday, on Sunday, or at 1 a.m. So make it very, very clear, and appreciate, and perhaps tell them, right, that's it now. You're done for the day, and shut down, and almost make it an instruction if you see people overworking, because their productivity will go down. There is no two ways about that. Eventually it will drop.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got things like stress and burnout and increase in absence and those sorts of things. So on the subject of the downfalls and the risks, what would you say are the HR risks that employers should be aware of?
Do you mean like in terms of, as you just said, there's a productivity potential drop, there's you might have performance issues. You still have a duty of care to your employees, whether they're working from home or not. We always think about the physical space, but you have actually got a responsibility for their health and well-being in terms of mental health as well. We are in a stressful time. You need to be aware of it. And you don't want to get yourselves into legal difficulties. So, okay, coronavirus has meant the introduction of the furlough scheme. It has not meant that we have dropped our employment law basis. That's still in place, but more importantly, best practice is still there to be adhered to and followed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So I think it's a time where there could be some people that think redundancy or HR challenges are understandable because of the crisis that we're in. And sometimes it can cause grey lines and people aren't aware of the legal responsibilities. And on other occasions, they're aware of the legal responsibilities, but not sure how they've been changed in the current circumstances.
Yeah.
So Is there anything in particular that they should be doing to ensure that they are complying now with the latest and most current legal requirements?
If they've got a concern, they should ask. They can look at ACAS. They can talk to them straight away, and they can talk to an HR supporter such as myself and yourself in what we do. But absolutely, the redundancy situation that is happening, we need to make sure you follow best practice as well as the law. You don't want to fall foul of that while you're trying to save your business. So it's very much ask and get the support. The other thing is the furlough scheme that has been introduced, the coronavirus job retention scheme, is new. We don't know. And the government have done a wonderful job in introducing it, but they did it quickly. And there's detail coming out all the time. So we need to keep checking back that it is still what we've already done is still correct. And keep talking to your staff. You must keep talking to them. They're here on the press, what happens. So make sure you update them as soon as you can, but as correctly as you can.
And what if you don't know? What if your staff are expecting things from you and you're still really struggling to understand it yourself?
I think you need to be honest. And you need to say, it is a different situation, we're working on it, we're going to come back to you, and make sure you do, even if you haven't got the full picture after that. Staff want reassurance that you're running your ship. Yeah.
Okay, that's a really good point. I guess that steadies them, doesn't it? Kind of gives them that steady reassurance that actually it's okay, there is leadership, there is clarity.
There is leadership, but also it's okay to not know.
Yes.
If that makes sense, it gives you some form of comfort. I don't know. They don't know. We're all in this together again. So, but I do think it's the update. If you say you're going to update on Friday and you still don't know, still give an update on Friday that you're working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And with regard to furlough, because as we've just touched on that, I'm aware there can be impacts not only for the people on furlough, but for the staff that are still working and for business owners or leaders that are making those decisions. So from your experience, what have you seen to be some of the challenges and the impacts on everyone involved within the job retention scheme process?
It's been interesting because some people see it as unfair that they haven't been furloughed and have been asked to work, which is possibly an odd scenario given where we are. And again, it comes back to explaining why their job is still required, what you're doing, what you're planning, where you're going, what the issues are. And being open and transparent as you can be to try and give the big explanation as to why you've had to keep their job going. If you've got an opportunity to swap people round on furlough, remembering that it's a minimum of 3 weeks, maybe you should do that. Also, the other thing is make people take their holiday, because we are in a worrying situation. I accept that people can't go away anywhere at the moment, but take a break. And take your holiday, and that counts for the people working as well as those actually on furlough.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say the workload has become heavier and employers start to notice their team getting a bit stressed. How do you think they should approach it in terms of their duty under health and safety to deal with stress in the workplace?
I go back to the communication. You need to talk to the individuals and ask them how they feel. So you can't pry too much, but you need to get them to open up as much as you can, because there might be something that you can amend, change quite easily, and give them the reassurance. And you have got that duty of care to them. It might not be their physical health, it is their well-being as well. You still have that duty of care, and it's important, and it's right for your business too. You get productivity, you get presence. So you need to start talking to the individual and be led by them. If then you identify there is an issue, correct what you can. If it's out of your gift to correct it, then perhaps you can signpost them to get some help. But you do need to be led by the individual, because unfortunately we still often see the admittance of mental health, poor mental health, as being a bit of a stigma. So be open, let them talk and let you know, and that's the best advice I can get, because then you can address it.
Yeah, that is brilliant. Okay, so being open, something I've seen as well is employers, when they hear the words, I struggle with anxiety or I'm stressed, they almost go into a bit of a panic, like, what do I do now? Like it's a very complex field, a complex area for many. So if they are worried, so the first thing they should do is talk and
Yeah.
ask questions and make it okay for it to
Make
be
it okay
discussed.
to talk.
Yeah, okay. And if people open up about their feelings to their manager or to anyone in the management team, what would you suggest they do as they're hearing that information? So an employee is telling them about they're stressed because of work, they're stressed because of the current circumstances. What's the best way for them to show care and also get the right balance between knowing where the line is as to how much they should go into?
I think it depends what your employee says to you. If it's if they say it's workload, then we need to look at it. We need to break it down, and we need to potentially give them manageable targets, small chunk it down for them. If it's the environment they're working in, what can we do to alleviate that? Have they got stresses with childcare? Have they got stresses at home with regard to people shielding, or that they are worried about their parents? What can you do as an employer where we're still getting that balance? Can you change their hours of work, for instance? Can you reduce their hours for the time being? There's a lot of things you can look at that are quite simple, but also don't expect to solve everything. We are in a very, very strange world at the moment, and there is some help out there. So signpost them to places that will help them. You can't be the expert, you can't solve everything, but you can help in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. And on the risks, are there any particular sticky challenges that maybe small businesses or employers may not have considered that they should be aware of or possibly thinking about?
Well, obviously you have got the law. You've got the Equalities Act, and you know, some forms of mental health can be considered a disability. So you do need to look at what that means in terms of, you know, whether you need to make some reasonable adjustments to the business. If anybody feels they're unfairly treated, then they have obviously got recourse to tribunals, which takes your time away from your business, but also what sort of culture are you setting for the rest of your employees, because they will see how somebody else is treated. So you also need to think about that, and what sort of company do you want to be? Do you want to be one that attracts people and they stay and they feel looked after and they're able to talk to you when they've got a problem that can potentially be resolved or helped? You need to think of all of that, but you're not the expert. You're not going to resolve it all, but you have got some issues, potential legal issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so picking up on some of the issues, I was also keen to explore what the longer term impacts might be, because I think the landscape will look quite different. So
Yes.
what do you see to be the longer term impacts of this on HR and people strategy?
Okay, one of the things that I would think of immediately is people are much more flexible in their working from home. So that needs to be built into where you're going moving forward. However, that was the initial reaction, that everybody loved I'm working from home, but people are tending to miss people. They're missing those water cooler conversations. They're missing the chatter, and the fact that you can sometimes just ask a person a quick question, whereas you wouldn't pick up the phone to call them. So I think we need to look at the working from home. Technology obviously is changing all the time, and it makes it easier, but it isn't for everybody. So you need to be looking at that, and also we are going to see, and we know we're going to see, a lot more issues with mental well-being in the workplace. We all have mental health. It's whether it's good or bad, and depending on what is going on in your life, it could be temporary, it could be high, it could be low, it could be something that's been diagnosed. There's all levels of mental health, and what you need to do is build into your people strategy how you're going to deal with that. So you can have a policy, you can write a policy, and you can stick it on the shelf and say, yep, we've got a wellbeing policy. Or you can make it part of your culture and make it so that managers feel okay to say, how are you? No, tell me, how are you? What are your challenges at the moment? And when something is identified, know what you can do. You can't do everything for them, but you can support. You can look at their workload, you can look at their reporting lines, you can look at potentially a bit of flexibility, you can look at changing hours. There's so many different things you can look at, but you need to have a policy in place so that your managers are confident in talking, and you walk your talk.
Absolutely. No, I thank you for that. I was also thinking that where managers maybe might learn how to be more comfortable with how to have those conversations, it can be quite complex and quite hard for managers just to listen. And there's a temptation that they have to fix things.
Yes.
And when actually what people really want is just simply to be heard, so that they can almost work through their own feelings as well. So from my experience, it really makes a big difference for leaders just to know that they can just listen and it's all right. And when the person then feels safe that they can express their feelings, then that will support them without even them saying a word, just that they've been safe enough to express feelings and still be respected and heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. That knowledge that you're not that your manager's got your back, but your manager's there for you. They can't solve everything, and they shouldn't expect to. And something is completely out of the manager's control, but the individual will feel better that the manager understands them.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. And some small businesses obviously may not have HR representation at all, and maybe don't even know what they don't know. They could be a whole bunch of things that they have no clue about. So what would you suggest would be the best way for small businesses to protect themselves and their company?
Well, obviously, I would say get some HR support on an ad hoc basis. Just reach out when you need to. And so if you have a doubt, though, ask and get some advice. You have got ACAS there, and if you're still worried, you will find somebody that will be able to support you. But it is true, you don't know what you don't know, and you could get yourself into all sorts of difficulties. So it's best to speak to somebody, an expert who can point you and help you and put you in the right direction.
Brilliant. And just popped into my mind, have you seen any companies be caught off guard with anything at the moment? Have you noticed any challenges come out of the blue and employers be shocked by anything?
Are employers ever shocked? I'm not sure. I was told once by a CEO never to be shocked by people. You will never have seen it all. But I think at the moment, obviously, people are worried and concerned, and offices and workplaces are opening back up again. And it's some of the people being very reticent to return to work, and it's whether they're genuine or not in terms of, that sounds very cynical, but I am seeing some people that think that the furlough particularly is a good option. And it is, all people have got fears of returning, they are genuine. So again, it's talking, what can we do to make you feel safe? And take all your reasonable steps. But I'm afraid there are one or two people who see the furlough as a long holiday.
Yeah,
and that is surprising in our current circumstances. Yes,
and a big challenge for small businesses, where people wear many hats, and it can be very difficult operating with limited resources. Okay, so if you were to help companies during this time, and a small business or any company were to reach out to you, what would be the first things that you would be checking if you were to do like an HR health check and see how you could support them? What kind of things would you be looking out for?
I'd be looking out to see their policies and procedures, and also what they got in place in terms of communication. Where are they at with their employees currently? Where are they at in the workplace, physically, as well as the mental bit, because obviously physical is such a big concern at the moment. And how much are they getting their employees involved in making sure they feel safe themselves?
Yes.
So you conduct your risk assessment, and then go to the employees. Is there anything more that I can do to make you feel better at work and safer at work?
Brilliant.
And there will be. But it needs to be reasonable too.
That is brilliant. So employers should be asking, is there anything more that I can do to help you feel safer at work?
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. And that was a really good point that you made about how employees feel better when they're involved. Getting them involved is so vital for employee engagement, that employees feel involved. In decisions and change. So brilliant. Thank you. All right. So obviously in a crisis, it's challenging anyway. However, even crisis aside, employee well-being can actually be a real challenge. So let's look at just generally some ways that companies can handle this. So we touched on this earlier, but just to be absolutely clear for anyone watching, if an employee flags that they're suffering from poor mental health, what are the practical steps that an employer should do?
I think initially it is to talk, trying to get them to open up so that you get an understanding as an employer of where their anxiety, stress or issues are. Because you can't fix them. You can fix some of the ways they're working. So get an understanding. And there might be something really simple that people get they could be on medication and in the morning it's difficult for them to get up and get going because of their medication. Okay, so what if we arranged for you to start at 10 o'clock every morning? Would that make it easier for you? And all of a sudden that member of staff feels relaxed, understood and no longer under that pressure. You've just alleviated. You haven't got rid of the problem, but you've alleviated some of the pressure for them. That's just a very simple thing to do. And obviously not every employer can do it. But if you can, that's just a very simple option. And there will be other things that an employee will come to you, and if you can do it, put it in place. You can do it temporarily, you can agree a review. You don't have to do it on a permanent basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And is there any...
Sorry about the talking, sorry to talk over you. It's okay. Very much about talking to the individual and getting them to say the issues that they're facing. They might need some time out, literally some time out of the office or work, and that's fine too.
Okay. And should they keep any documentation on this, Linda?
Yeah, I think they should, but they should tell the employee what they're documenting. They should also tell what they're agreeing, and they should also agree when they're going to review it again, so that there is a record. They can demonstrate what's been agreed and what's been put in place. Okay. It's good, obviously, because you can't remember everything anyway, but also good for a reference if it should unfortunately go wrong in the future.
Okay. And should there be a formal risk assessment done? Yes. When there should be. Okay, so at what point would it trigger a risk assessment?
I think one of the things will be an employee's absenteeism, perhaps, of productivity drop, and that conversation with the individual. Say, okay, let's have a look, let's do a risk assessment, let's understand and see where the pressures are, and from there you can then look at it again. But you've also got that record, and there are risk assessments. You haven't got to come up with it yourself. You can get hold of one. There's a plethora of information. HSE will have one that you can pull off and adapt it for your business. But absolutely, there's a record again of what's been discussed and agreed.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. And from your experience of working with several businesses of various sizes and industries, what have you seen that's worked really well when it comes to employee wellbeing? What kind of examples have you seen where you go, wow, actually they're doing a great job?
What I have seen is where it's absolutely recognised and accepted that, like I refer back to, that we all got mental health and we all go up and down, and it can be temporary, it can be permanent, it can be diagnosed, it might not be. It might be just that something's going on in your life at that moment in time. It doesn't have to be work related. Where it works best is where it's an open culture and it's referred to. So if you have a policy, and I would encourage companies to have a policy, then make sure you keep referring to it. Make sure you refer to people taking rest. Make sure if you have doing a company update, you do refer to wellbeing. Don't just take it off the shelf when you've got a problem. Make it intrinsic into your culture, so that it almost becomes a non-issue in terms of raising it.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because sometimes employers or managers might think that they're covering well-being, but because they haven't put that context to it, others don't receive it that way.
Yes.
So, for example, a manager might say, how are you coping with workload, under the context of well-being, and someone else might think, are they saying I'm not doing enough?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that context, like you said, when they communicate, under what's the context, referring back to employee well-being, so that the employees really understand the intention of the behaviour and can feel cared about.
Yeah, one of the best managers I have ever had, we'd have a regular one-to-one. We weren't located in anywhere near the same area of the country, and it wouldn't matter what time of night we were finishing, and he would have a long travel afterwards, and we'd do the business part of the conversation. Then he'd put his pen down and he would say, now how are you? And you would go, I'm fine. No, how are you? And at that point, I felt I was important. It wasn't my work, I was important to what was going to be achieved. And lovely. I think that probably helped with his planning as well, and because he knew where everybody was in their world at that time.
No, that is brilliant. And the way you said that can be very insightful for some people, because there's a big difference between saying, hi, how are you? Versus, no, how are you? It's that genuine place of caring. And I think research shows that actually the employees that feel genuinely cared about as a person, not just as someone doing a job, makes them much more likely to stay and perform at a
feel
higher
aligned
level.
to the business. Absolutely. They're cared for. Absolutely.
So how are you can easily be a habit, can't it? Can be just like something that we say. And actually there's a big difference between a habit hello versus a genuine how are you. I think
it's always good. I think it's recommended ask twice, because the initial how are you, I'm fine. No, how are you? It's different. Ask twice.
Good tip. Ask twice. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so under health and safety then, if an employer currently is unsure whether they are fulfilling their duty of care, what steps should they take to ensure that they are complying with health and safety?
Well, they need to check the law. They need to talk to their individuals. They need to get advice where they need to, and they need to document that and put it in place. Don't get the advice and then ignore it, because you're in a worse position than if you did nothing. So it's worth checking, because you'll be surprised the duty of care, what it extends to.
And is that all available on the HSE?
It is, absolutely. You can refer to them, you can speak to them, and you can also, obviously, as I referenced before, ACAS would also support.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, and when there is absence that's related to mental health, I think that this is a grey area which really causes people stress all around, because the employer doesn't know, wants to be careful, wants to support, doesn't know really like the right way to handle it, or where the lines are. So if someone is off with anxiety or stress or any mental health condition, either diagnosed or not diagnosed, how should an employer manage that?
It's the contact with the individual, but not too much contact. If you need to, you ask them if you can speak to their GP or their therapist, whoever they're seeing, to get a report back from them. That there is stages that you need to go through to get that, because they're the experts and they will give you the support and advice on what, as an employer and the workplace, that you would need to put in place to encourage the individual back to work. And it could be a phased return, there could be all sorts of different things, but you do need to address it, because if you don't, all that will happen is they'll come back to work and they'll go off again. And that also isn't good for work colleagues. It's not good for productivity. It's not good for you as an employer, because you're spending your time worrying about where the individual is and the impacts. So you need to talk to the individual, and you need to treat it in many respects the same as you would any other absence from work, but it's listening to the individual.
Okay. And let's say, Linda, that you've had some absence that you haven't actually addressed or done a risk assessment on, and it's started to become a pattern, but you haven't done anything about it yet. Are you allowed to speak about that pattern or address it as an ongoing concern?
Absolutely, and you should do it informally first, and then keep, as we've referenced earlier, keep records, and then if you need to bring in your policy on attendance, and look to, unfortunately, you may need to go through the disciplinary, but you do need to make sure you've put in place the right reasonable adjustments to allow that person to work, taking account of the struggles that they are possibly going through.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. All right, so if a company is having to put together a wellbeing policy, let's say they haven't got one and they're putting it together, what sort of things should it include, Linda?
I think it needs to be reflective of their culture. First of all, again, like we've referenced, don't just have it for on the shelf. It's got to be something you're going to put intrinsically into the business. You need to talk about your aims and the purpose of having a wellbeing policy. And again, it's to make sure that you're looking after your staff, that you're a good employer, and the staff want to stay with you, but your aims are that it's a good place to be. That you need to reference your support mechanisms that you've got in place, who and how to speak to people to raise any concerns you've got. I would also suggest if you've got any things like employee assistance programs, you put them in there so that employees don't have to come to their manager. They can, if they want to, ring up the confidential helpline perhaps that your EAP provides. And any other signposts that you can put in there, you should have. Absolutely demonstrate that you prioritise staff's wellbeing for the benefit of them, not just for the company.
Absolutely, that is really helpful. And so just to be clear, if a company needed any support with writing a policy, is that something you would be able to help with?
Absolutely, and we wouldn't want to, whilst we would want some certain headings such as aims and things like that through it, it won't be one that works for one company and doesn't work for the other. There's no point having it, it's a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so tailored to the business.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, and so kind of summarising where we've been and how we move forward, what would you say are your top 3 tips to ensure a watertight approach to workplace wellbeing?
I think a policy is a really good place to start, because actually it makes you think before you write it, before you create it. What do you want it and what are you trying to achieve out of it? Then make sure your managers know and understand too what you're trying to achieve. There's no point having it if it's not then followed through. And I would also say you walk your talk. So make sure that it is throughout the business, that you do reference it, and that people do know it's there. Don't have it hidden in the corner and go, oh yeah, by the way, have you read this? No, it's got to be part of your everyday culture.
And the language and making it the norm.
The norm. It's okay to not be okay.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So our specialist skills at Life Ladder is about personal development.
Yeah.
And in our experience, we found there to be a big link between personal development and employee well-being. In your experience, what would you say are the benefits of personal development in the context of well-being?
Well, I think it develops you can develop your resilience. It develops your self-esteem, your sense of achievement, and you're moving forward. You're taking control of yourself a bit, and so quite often that's what people struggle with, is they're losing control, and particularly in the environment we're in at the moment, we've lost some control over our lives. So I think personal development is a great time to focus on it if you can, and you will grow as anyway. But I think there's that self-esteem element that you're addressing and controlling for yourself. It's an important aspect.
And have you noticed that companies are investing in development for staff, even if they're on furlough?
There is a lot of encouragement for staff, because it's made very clear on furlough that you can still do training and self-development and fall into that. And there is so much out there that you should reach out for, to Life Ladder, for example. But there is so much that you can do without having to register on a course or something. There is lots that you can do over the internet. And the fact that you've done it, the fact that you've gone and looked for it, will make you feel good and help you. But yeah, absolutely, on furlough, and many employers are sending updates of, have you looked at this course, have you looked at that course? It's a brilliant time.
Wonderful. So for example, because we really want to step up and help at Life Ladder, so would it be beneficial, would you say, for HR professionals to be able to signpost employees to a service like ours?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. Yes, definitely. Because actually, it's surprising how much an employee comes back and will say, thank you for pointing that out to me. Thank you for that. That was a great, it's really, and it's showing you care as an employer. You're looking after their wellbeing.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Linda. You've been so generous with your time today and sharing your expertise. And I really appreciate that you wanted to step up and do that, as it's Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yes.
And I know that you really care about the workplace being geared up for a people approach and having that empathy and kindness. So it makes a really big difference to have your skills. And I know that people watching this will feel more equipped to at least know where to start and what they should be thinking about exactly. And of course, if they needed more HR support, then they can come to you.
Absolutely, they can. Yes, absolutely, happy to help. And as you say, people don't always know what they don't know, and when you don't always have to wait for an issue. If there's a concern, if there's anything you want to talk about, reach out and we can work our way forward.
Wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we signpost clearly if people want to reach you, or they just want a chat to know if they're on the right track.
Exactly.
And we'll certainly point them in your direction. And of course, if we can help you in any way, so at Life Ladder, our corporate membership is about enabling employers to provide personal development for all of their staff. So they can provide access to a personal development platform where employees can set personal goals, they can monitor their own success and positive steps forward, which helps with anchoring in success and good feelings for self-esteem and self-improvement.
Yeah.
And there's learning content every day to help people manage their minds, their mindsets, and discover their real sort of potential so that they can be happier and achieve more.
Excellent.
So there is resources there, and we also offer 7 free tips if there's any HR managers that want to experience it first and see if it could help them as they're going through it as well, I'm sure, at the moment. So, but we want to say a huge thank you, Linda, for your expertise and for being here with us. Thank you very much.